needed to be, in those days it was New York, it was the place to go because that's where the publishing was. That's where most of the magazines had their offices. And it was between San Francisco and New York. I could have gone to San Francisco for the lifestyle, which I loved. My brother lives up there. But to have a career, I decided I was going to have to be in New York. So that's why I moved there. And fortunately, by that time, I was prepared. I knew you go to New York, expect to have your quality of life go down, unless you happen to be rich. And so I was braced for that, and I did fine. I did fine with it. And some of you may be aware that for a little while I worked at Starlog Magazine. I was the art director of Starlog Magazine for about 8 months. And then I continued to do freelance work for Starlog and their sister magazines, Fangoria and Future Life for a while after that. But by the time I left Starlog, I had begun to make contacts in the New York publishing world because people come through the offices. Remember this, you're aspiring cartoonists. You've got to be in the same world as the people who hire cartoonists. They won't come looking for you in your house. And but being in the office of a magazine, networking opportunities came. And for example, the assistant editor at Starlog was personal friends with Ted White, who was editing Heavy Metal for a while. And to my shock, she said he was aware of my work, and I should go over there with my portfolio. I didn't think of Heavy Metal as a place for me at all, because it was famous for very heterosexual, lusty space babes comics.
I think it's still famous.
Well, Ted White, and actually for a little while, Julie Simmons, Lynch, who followed him, both of them were sort of open to my work, and I appeared in Heavy Metal for a while, but then more changes of editorship and more structural changes and ownership changes. I couldn't, there's basically no place to be in Heavy Metal anymore. But it was a nice little period, and a lot of people saw my Heavy Metal work for the first time. Just as a lot of people first saw Barefootz in Comix book, which was the weird Marvel Underground hybrid that made it for 3 issues in the mid-70s. And still people who that's when they first saw me. So these little opportunities come, and sometimes they have a little staying power, and bit by bit you build a reputation.
So 2 years into staying or being in New York, you met your husband to be Eddie.
That's right.
Can you talk about what kind of influence he's had on your career, whether through the times in gay comics and especially Sniper?
Well, Eddie, Ed Sedarbaum is his full name. Eddie is not a comics fan particularly, but he liked my work. He told me when he met me and asked what I did, and I said I was a cartoonist. He sort of in New York City, that's sort of like you meet someone and they say they're an actor, and like there's a great movie where someone introduces themselves. They say, "What do you do?" "I'm an actor." "Oh, which restaurant?" So Eddie was real pleased when he learned that I actually was a honest-to-God real cartoonist, and he's always been very supportive. Well, he's not a comics person himself, and but what do you say about a spouse who's been supportive, for now 31 years?
He was an editor for a good 13 years.
He was a book editor.
How much of that did he bring into your relationship and work?
Well, believe me, grammatical errors did not go unnoticed.
What was one you still had, like 2 words?
He still loves to talk about how resistant I was because I wanted to make dorky a single word, D-O-O-R-K-E-Y. And the Underground Comics version was, and he teased me about that so much and insisted it was wrong, and I said, no, it seemed right to me. But when I finally reprinted the script in an early anthology called Dancing Naked with the Angels, I did change it. Eddie usually ultimately will win these arguments because he's knowledgeable. And he also had many careers. He was when I met him, he was a social services worker for New York City. And then he was a book editor for 10 years, and then he decided he'd been being a volunteer activist in various gay organizations, and he decided he wanted to see if he could actually be a professional community organizer. And he went through a number of incarnations, including running for the New York State Senate, which was closer than I ever thought I would be to an electoral campaign. And it was very interesting to watch and very interesting to have going on in the household. And you had to negotiate what my role would be and what it wouldn't be. And but he supported me in my comics, and I supported him in his basically I did his campaign literature. And we had a quota of appearances that I would be the smiling spouse in the background. I did some of that.
I want to talk about gay comics for a second in terms of the interest about the art of acquiring material. Obviously, again, it was, I mean, I don't know, you pointed out it's not the first of its kind per se, but it was certainly the first that was prominent out there and people have acquired. Can you talk about that, how the challenges?
Well, it was interesting because, I mean, it's such contrast to the way things are now, where, you know, there's all, you can have a, you know, a whole booth of gay cartoonists, like the prison booth here at the time, but basically there were practically no openly gay comics people in 1979 when we sent out the solicitation letter. And Andy Mangles, who's standing over there behind the camera, he did this article, a two-part article for Amazing Heroes magazine about gays and out of the closet, out of the comics into the closet, out of the closet into the comics. That's what it was. And he interviewed a bunch of comics professionals, but nobody would allow him to use their name, except me. So I felt sort of lonesome out there. But they were, some of them have come out by now, and some of them are still closeted. But it was a vastly different world. So I didn't know who was gay in the cartooning world, except for Roberta Gregory and Mary Wings, both of whom had published lesbian comic books. So I wanted to be sure to get them involved. And then Lee Mars, who had a big following from her Pudge Girl Blunt comics, she just jumped right in, which I was so tickled by. And but other than that, we sent out a letter to everybody on Dennis Kitchen's mailing list and said, so we're going to put out this comic, and we don't know who's gay, so if you're not gay, but you know a friend, you know, my cartoonist friend who's gay, please give this to them. And we just hoped it would get around, and sure enough, we started getting submissions, more than I quite had dared hope we would. Although, you know, and so over the years since then, I think the floodgates rather opened. I think a lot of people felt as I did that you simply couldn't be out and have a career. And gay comics helped a lot of people get over that. And soon, that in combination with the advances of the gay liberation movement, where you had a whole new generation of young people who did not go through the agonies and denial and stuff that I went through in the coming out process, it just seemed the most natural thing in the world. Oh, here's a place I can do stuff about being gay. And by the time, 10 years after Gay Comics came out, I co-curated an art show of gay and lesbian comics for the Gay Community Center in New York City. And the majority of the people who had art in that show, I had not seen their work before. Now, when I was editing Gay Comics, I was the funnel through which all gay cartooning came. It was the only publication of its sort. I mean, Gay Heartthrob was not still a going thing. And so basically, if a cartoonist, a gay lesbian cartoonist wanted to be in comics, my comic was the place. And so I knew everybody for a while, but that ended. And then by now, they started in their little local papers, they would be having their comic strips, and Alison Bechdel started doing Dykes to Watch Out For, and developed an audience, and they would each develop their audiences locally, and then bit by bit nationally. And now, at this part, you have the anthologies like Boy Trouble, which have been two editions of Boy Trouble, which used gay, lesbian, and bisexual and transgender cartoonists. And they are a whole new crop, a constant new crop. And if there are cartoonists in this room who haven't started yet, join the crowd.
So Howard, the problem with moderating these panels is, of course, they never give you enough time, especially for someone like Howard with such a long and illustrious career. So I want to skip, in the time we have, I want to make sure we open the floor for some questions. So I do want to skip right ahead to Stuck Rubber Baby, because, I mean, again, with gay comics, I talked about in the introduction about being ahead of its time in the overall comic community. And we talk about this graphic novel that, again, we're talking 1990. We take graphic novels for granted now. Can you give us a sense of what the feeling was like at that time around the notion of a graphic novel? You called it a project with a 2-year advance going on year 5 and the bills hadn't been paid. Can you talk about that era and what a graphic novel was or accepted?
Well, the Mouse had come out. Mouse, of course, was the breakthrough graphic novel that was read by non-comics fans and was reviewed in the New York Times Book Review, albeit in a review that started out, Mouse is not a comic book, it's good, or something close to that. But in the wake of, but Will Eisner, of course, and Phil Yates had pioneered in this field a long time ago, and also a cartoonist named, as I recall it, Jack Katz. Katz, I know his last name, he did the Lost Kingdom. He was working on this long form work. Everyone knew that it could happen. It just, but could it, who's going to pay the bills while you draw that much stuff?